Hi everybody, and welcome to this, sadly our last Q&A of this series. So it's just before 5, so we'll give it a few minutes, see how many people join us. But as always, just start popping your questions in the chat, and we will cover as much as we can in this because it's our last hour together, at least as part of this series. Hi Peter, nice to see you. Okay, so I'm just going to say hello to everybody again in case anybody else has joined. So sadly, this is our last session together. So as always, just pop your questions in the chat. I did have a question from Lonnie in advance, so I'm going to wait to talk about that until I can see that he is here, although you can always see it in the replay. But for now, we've got a question from Peter, so I'm just going to have a look at that and then we will get started. So I'm just going to start by sharing my screen now and have a look at your question, Peter. So there, if you are looping over a large amount of data, so Peter has an application that iterates through the lines of a text file, and it can be very large. And if LiveCode is working and you click a button, then you get a message sometimes saying that LiveCode is not responding. So there are a couple of ways that you can deal with it. So the first thing to check is that you're looping in the most efficient way. So there are multiple ways that you can loop over some data in LiveCode, and it's important to make sure that you are using the most efficient one. And then the other thing you can do is, depending on what you're doing in your loop, you can allow messages through. So for example, you might want to allow the user to click on a cancel button. And if you want them to be able to do that, then you have to allow for that cancel button to break the loop. So I'm just going to show you in the dictionary. So you'd always be using a repeat loop, and there are different types of repeat loops, and I'm pretty sure that the most efficient one is to loop over the actual lines. So if it's a text file, so you're checking each line for invalid data. So it's faster to use repeat for each line in rather than looping with an iterator. So if I just make a little stack here, and let's make a very, very basic, don't know if I'll be able to make one easily that actually shows, but I'll show you the different types of repeat loops you can use. Okay, so if we wanted to loop over each line here in a button, so on mouse up, we could do repeat with x equals 1 to the number of lines in field 1, and then we would do something with line 1. So we would, let's do validate line x for field 1, and this would work. This would work fine. But a more efficient way to do it would be to do repeat for each line t line in field 1, and then validate t line. And that's more efficient because this is using a counter. So depending on how many lines you have and what you're doing, and validate using the counter by the time you get up to the higher numbers. In order to find line 267, it has to count through all the lines up to there until it gets to 267. Whereas using this is a much more efficient way. Now, I'm not sure that this will actually, that either will take long enough for us to be able to see how fast that would be. And so, but certainly, if you're doing something like this, always try and use the repeat for each line in a field or element in an array or anything like that. Repeat for each something will always be faster than repeat with x equals 1 to the number of. So that's something to check. And oh, sure, sorry, Peter's just clarified that he means it's not just clicking on a button that will cause LiveCode to not respond, it'll be clicking anywhere. Yeah, because that's just LiveCode, or it'll be trying to process that click, whether it's on a button or anywhere. So it's just when you're in a loop like this, it'll be using a lot of processor power. So the first thing to do is try and make sure that you're doing it as efficiently as possible. The other thing is, depending on what's actually happening in here, if you're doing sends or waits or anything like that, it's always worth allowing messages through. So I don't know if you'd be doing a wait for any reason, but you can wait with messages, which would allow messages to get through. And that's what you would need to do if you're wanting to process a cancel button. What else can you do? So yeah, if you wanted to have a cancel button while you're doing a repeat, you would have probably a script local variable that would store whether it should be running or not. And then when you click on the cancel button, so let's put a cancel button here and I'll show you what I mean. So this would just call something on the card script. So on mouse up, say cancel processing. And actually, let's make our button here, this would start processing. And then in our card script, we would have on start processing and on cancel processing. And we would have a script local, S processing perhaps. And then on start processing, we would put true into S processing. On cancel processing, we would put false into it. And during our loop, so during our iterator, so here we're doing repeat for each line, T line. So what we would do is we would check if we're still processing. So we would say if S processing is true, then validate T line, else. So if it's not true anymore, if cancel's been pressed, we would exit repeat, and that would stop our repeat happening. Okay, great, Peter. So I would try repeat for each. It's hard to know exactly what it will be. The reason that you get that message is just because it's doing a lot of processing and it's using a lot of processing power. It doesn't actually always mean that LiveCode has truly stopped responding. So try switching to repeat for each. The other way that you can do it is, instead of doing everything in here, you can use a send in here. So you can, that's how you do things like counters and timers and stuff. So you send update timer, that can help as well. But I would try, yeah, switching to repeat for each line and see if that helps. And you can always, if you are stuck, do feel free to drop a message to support at LiveCode, perhaps with your stack in it, and I'd be happy to take a quick look. Oh, and then Devlin suggested using lock screen. So lock screen is really only for screen updates. So if you say you have a progress bar, if you lock the screen at the start of the repeat and don't unlock it till the end, then you won't see the progress in your progress bar, which obviously you probably do want to be able to see. Lock screen is more for if you're moving a lot of changing the UI a lot, because that uses processor power, and also it can make things look tidier. So lock screen is really for UI updates. You can do lock messages, which stops all the internal messages being sent while you're doing something, and that can help. You could try putting a lock messages and an unlock messages in, but depending on what that'll have an impact depending on what you're doing in your validation. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look, and I'm going to see if Lonnie is here before we start chatting about the things he asked about. No, looks like it's just the three of us at the moment. So if anybody, oh, you tried lock messages, yeah. I mean, that lock messages will help in some cases depending on what you are actually doing. It won't always help. It helps if there's lots of if there are messages being sent around that are taking up time, but if not, then lock messages won't actually make any difference. Okay, so either of you have any other questions? If not, what I'll do is I will talk about Lonnie's question, and hopefully he'll be able to catch up with it in the replay. So it's quite interesting anyway what Lonnie had asked about. He'd asked if we could talk a bit about behaviors and libraries and script-only stacks. And these are things that we've talked about a bit in some of the previous sessions, but not gone into maybe as much detail as we could have. Just going to stop this bouncing. So script-only stacks are just scripts that don't have a UI element. So they can be used for behaviors, or they can be used as libraries. And they're useful if you want to use a version control system like GitHub or Bitbucket, any other version control system, because they are just text files. So they can easily be, be managed. That's not quite what I mean, but they can easily be managed by the features that the version control system provides, like diff. So it'll actually be able to show you exactly what line in the text file has changed. It can't do that with a binary LiveCode stack. It can tell you that it has changed, but it can't tell you where. Whereas in a text file, it can say you've changed this line and this line and this line, and you can check them. So that's the main reason for using script-only stacks, is so that you can separate your code from your UI, which is the binary element. So with script-only stacks, you can use them for behaviors or libraries, and behaviors and libraries are quite different things. So I've got a little example here, and I'll also show you some of the libraries that exist in LiveCode itself. So a library is, I guess, it's a supporting file that can provide commands, functions, things like that, and it's something that you might want to reuse in lots of stacks. So if anybody's used any other programming languages, lots of programming languages, Java, C, they have lots and lots of libraries available that you can just include and save you doing lots of work again. So that's what libraries are for. They're sets of functions and commands that will provide extra functionality for you, and you can use them in all your projects if you want to. So I made a very simple, so simple that it's kind of silly. So I made a calculation library here. So this is a script-only stack. You can see at the top, if I open it in a text editor, it starts with script. It's called calculation library, and it provides a function, just sum values. LiveCode actually has a sum function anyway, but off the top of my head, I could only think of a really simple example. But you might want to write a calculation library that would provide you, if you're doing something very mathematical or lots of statistics, you could write a library that would include all these functions for you, and then you would just be able to use this one stack. You could just use it in all your projects. You could even share it with other people. So that's really what a library is. It's a way of adding additional functionality without having to rewrite it every time, and it's separate to your stack, and you just include it. So it's a really useful thing, libraries. And the way that you use them in LiveCode is you write yourself a stack. I've got one here. This is my test A stack. Open this up. So actually, let me show you this from the start, because it was already open in LiveCode. So if I reopen this, and I want it to be able to use my calculation library. And in order to do that, in the stack script, all I have to do is I have to say start using stack, and then because it's a script-only stack, I just point it to the full path to that file, which is, at the moment it's in my desktop, but I'm using resources, which points to the folder that the stack is saved in, and then I give it the name of the stack. And what this will do is this will load this into memory, and it'll make all the functions and commands in that stack available to my stack. So in this button, which I'm just going to change the name of to sum, what this does is this calls the function that I implemented in my library stack, which is sum values, and it just does answer sum values field 1, field 2. So if I change these, put numbers in there, then it'll give me the sum of those two. And that is actually, it's not on my stack. If I look at the project browser, this sum values is not implemented on my actual stack. So here's my stack. The only code in it is where I start using the library, and there's my mouse up. It's actually calling the function in the library. And so because it's in the library, if I have a long, complicated statistics library or anything else, then I can use that in any other stack, and I just need to include it by using start using stack, and that loads it into memory. If you want to think about where it is in the message path, it's right at the top of the message path. So all controls and objects in your stack have access to those library functions, and you're loading them into memory and making them available by doing start using stack. So that's what libraries are for. And there's quite a few LiveCode libraries available. And if you're interested in libraries, a lot of the actual of LiveCode itself is implemented in libraries. So if we have a look at the LiveCode Business app, so inside contents, inside tools, if we look at extensions, then quite a lot of these are libraries. So for example, the OAuth library, now that is written in LiveCode. There's our OAuth2.LiveCode script. Now I can open that up in the stack editor, in the text editor, sorry, and you'll see this is the script library, com.livecode.library.oauth2, and this library provides all the functionality to use OAuth2 in your stacks. And it's because it's a library, it's all implemented in this OAuth2 library, and you can use it in any apps that you are interested in. So that's a library, the MIME library, that's another one. These ones are LiveCode script libraries. There is another type of library, which is a LiveCode builder library. So in that case, those are tagged with LCB. And they're also text files. You can still open them up, but those are written in LiveCode builder rather than LiveCode script. So that's libraries. And then the other thing that we've talked about previously that had been asked about was behaviors. So behaviors can also be script-only stacks, but behaviors are more for providing sort of UI functionality, I guess, than sort of library functionality. So if we think about the example we looked at before, which was our Hangman game. So if I open that up, so here's our Hangman game. And what we'd done is we'd changed it so that the buttons use a behavior. So I'm going to just show the invisible object so that we can see our button behavior. There it is, letter behavior. Make that visible, turn this off again. Right, so there's our letter behavior. And what it's doing is it's actually providing the mouse up handler. Now you wouldn't normally implement a mouse up handler in a library because libraries, generally they provide functionality that's not UI based, that's not control based, it's sort of faceless, I guess. It might not be quite the right word, but so in general, a library is just providing functionality that's sort of not related to the UI. I mean, it's things that you'll use in your UI, but you're not responding to messages and user interaction and things in libraries. But you can do that in behaviors. So what you're doing here is we're actually implementing the mouse up in our behavior, because this is going to be the behavior of the buttons. So each button is set to that behavior. And similarly, we used a behavior for our card script. And rather than doing it in a button, so behaviors are either in buttons or script-only stacks. That's the only place they can be implemented. So here, it's in a button. It's just part of the stack, part of our binary stack. But in our card, open up the card inspector, go to this pane, you can see that it has the behavior set on it, and that's actually our game behavior script. So script-only stacks will usually be either behaviors or libraries. And the difference between a behavior and a library is usually whether it's something, I guess you can think of it as being either something that's related to the UI and to events and to messages and to user interactions, or just sort of separate supporting functionality. So things like the OAuth library, the MIME library, a calculation library, a statistics library, that are just providing that extra functionality. And script-only stacks are just stacks that only have the script component and no UI component. And they're usually used for behaviors and libraries, but script-only stacks are not, they're not like a behavior or like a library. They're just a stack. They just don't have a UI component. Oh, sorry, make the font larger in my editor. So I can do that here. Let's put it here. And then in my text editor, how do I do it here? There we go. Let's make it bigger. Okay, so hopefully that has covered behaviors and libraries and what they're used for. And script-only stacks, they're just a way to write a behavior or a library. And script-only stacks are just a stack with no UI component. So hopefully that has clarified that a little bit. Let's see now, it's still just the three of us here. So if you have any other questions, please do let me know. Don't have much actually prepared for this session because we haven't normally needed to prepare much. There's always been plenty of questions, not so much today. So yeah, just any questions that you've got, even if they're more general, if they're specific. Oh, Lonnie asked that his earlier stack be shared. I think he mentioned that he uploaded it to our sharing portal. Let's see if we can find it. Can I remember what it was called? Might be able to search by his name. It was called Play YouTuber. It was the last time that I saw it. Let's give this a second and see if it manages to do the search. So Devon, can LiveCode be used to manipulate segments to an SVG image? So I think that'll depend on how complicated your SVG is. So we have two ways of displaying SVGs in LiveCode. The first is just SVG Paths. So here we've got, here's our control, and there's the path data. And I can change that to a different path. You can also put your own path in here. You don't have to use a preset one. So depending on what you want to do, you could maybe use chunk expressions, which I think we have talked about in the past. So you could potentially do something with the path data and chunk expressions. Now, the other way that you can display SVGs is actually to use an image control. I don't know if I've got an SVG handy, but I should be able to find one. And then what you can do is, if you've got a full sort of full SVG image rather than just the path, then what you can do is you can use the drawing SVG compile function with the XML text, or the text that's in the XML file, and display it. And because it is actually XML data, you could probably use the XML library to do things with the SVG path. Let me see if I can find a file that we can look at. A second. See if I can find something. Let's try this file. Sure, might work. Or do I have another one that I can use somewhere? Okay, let's try this one. So on mouse up, we would use drawing SVG compile and the XML text. So let's get the XML text first. So we would put we would put URL bin file. And it's on the desktop. It is called we'll put that into tdata. Then we're drawing SVG compile tdata. I think we just set the text of image 1. Is this going to work? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So this, let's have a look at this in our text editor. So this is more than just a path. This is a full SVG file. And this is how we load it in. So we get the data, and then we use our drawing SVG compile. And there's all our data in there. And because it's an XML file, you could use the XML library to extract parts of it. Now, if you wanted to do more with SVG and paths, etc., then you could take a look at LiveCode Builder. Now, I don't know if everybody has access to the widget course, but we do have a widget course, and LiveCode Builder was written to allow people to write widgets. So all our widgets here are written in LiveCode Builder, and some of the libraries that I showed you earlier as well. And in LiveCode Builder, you can do a lot with paths. So you can do all these things to draw parts of your widget. So for example, let's see, what's a nice widget? So even like the spinner widget, that's written in LiveCode Builder, and those will all be circle paths. So if you're interested in doing things with SVG, it might be worth having a look at LiveCode Builder, maybe the widget course if you have access to that. But if not, the only two methods that we have at the moment of displaying SVGs are using just the path or using the drawing SVG, the drawing SVG compile library. So those are your two methods for SVG. Instead, I'm gonna search here for YouTube. Let's see if it is here anywhere. It doesn't look like it's been uploaded. Ah, yes, it is. There we go. So if you want to get Lonnie's stack, if you open up the sample stacks from the menu bar and you search for Play YouTube, then you can download it from our sharing resource. So he has uploaded it here, and you can just click on download and it'll download it for you. So yes, you can find Lonnie's stack there. Okay, Peter's asking, referring back to iterating through a text data file, is it normally faster to use chunk expressions or to set up an array and refer to array elements? It probably depends how you want to be able to access all the data. If you're going to access all the parts of the data, then it might be faster as a one-off to set up the array, and then you can jump straight to parts of it. If not, if you're just iterating through and validating or doing something like that, then I would say just to use chunk expressions. But it really depends on what you want to do with your data. So for example, if your data is sort of like spreadsheet type data and it's got different columns and you want to iterate through and you want to, sort of grab each column or field of data and access it directly, then yes, it probably would be faster to put it into an array and then be able to jump straight to, element 23 and then first name or whatever it may be. It'll really depend on what you want to do with the data, but in general, chunk expressions are very fast. Great, Devlin. Yes, the widget builder. So, like I say, I'm not sure. I think probably everybody has access to the widget course, which covers libraries and widgets. And I think there's quite a few resources on building widgets. If you have a look at we've got some blog posts on widgets that people have written. I think there might be some stuff on our lessons portal as well. Let's have a look. We've certainly got lessons about using our widgets. I think we have a couple on writing widgets. And certainly if you're interested in doing stuff with SVG, I think it gives you a lot more control than LiveCode script does. Okay, so here we have a lesson, write a widget in 8 steps. So this lesson shows how to create a little speech bubble widget. We should have a picture of it somewhere at the end, probably. Yeah, so a speech bubble with some text in it. So this is a nice lesson on making a very simple bubble, and it actually does cover some path stuff. So yeah, there we've got move to point, curve through point. I think it's just move to point and curve through point, but that's quite a nice lesson for a very first widget. So I would start there, and like I say, I think you should have access to the widget course inside the learning section of your LiveCode account as well. Yeah, so if you're finding chunk expressions easier, then I would stick with those until the point where they become cumbersome, at which point you could maybe think about an array. But if the chunk expressions make more sense, then I would stick with those for now. It should be fast enough. So as a follow-up to an earlier question, I was going to ask about finding out about GPS coordinates embedded into an image. Now, I think I included something that I found in the slides. Let me bring up the slides that I wrote to go with last week's session. I can bring those up here. Okay, so here are the slides from last week's lesson that I think should be attached to the they should be attached to the video by now. Let's see if I can find the right one. So image metadata. So I discovered that LiveCode does have metadata of image property, but the only property you can currently get is density. But one of the members of our community has written a LiveCode library for reading and manipulating image data, which you can find on GitHub, or there's also discussion on our forum. So if I go to here, this is available on GitHub. It's freely available. I'm not sure what type of license it is, but there should be some information in here. So you just call exif process file array with the data, and then it will give you back the data in an array form. So hopefully that might give you some of what you need. There's nothing built into LiveCode for image metadata other than the density property, but there is this library available, and I did find some discussion on our forum, which also might be useful. Didn't want the word forum, I wanted the link to the forum. So there's a whole sort of discussion here on reading basic image metadata, what people have tried, people who have tried using the library that I mentioned. So yeah, I would have a look at this this library that somebody has written and see if that provides the functionality that you need. And it is, the links to it are in the slides from last week's session. So hopefully you have access to those and you will be able to get the library from there. So I don't know, I was going to say as well, I think in the forum somebody mentioned making an enhancement request to try and get some more metadata other than just the density property. So if there isn't already an enhancement request, you could add one at quality.livecode.com, which is our sort of our bug database, our quality control system. Actually, I'll have a look and see if there is one already. Yeah, let's try image metadata. So there's one that's been hibernated, but if there is anything like that in general that you think is missing from LiveCode that you would find useful, you can always add an enhancement request at our quality control center at quality.livecode.com. You will need to set up an account, and it will be separate to your LiveCode account. We would love to be able to consolidate everybody's accounts together, but we're not quite there yet. So if you do want to add enhancement requests or indeed report bugs or comment on bugs, then you'll need to set up an account with our quality control center. But that's how you get things sort of like straight to the dev team. The dev team pick up the bugs and investigate them. So even if you email support, if it's a scripting question or something, then I will do my best to help. But sometimes the things turn out to be bugs in LiveCode or things that are missing from LiveCode. In that case, we do a report in our quality control center, and it sort of gets passed to the development team for consideration and for getting into future versions of LiveCode. So that's two things that I think are worth doing if you haven't done it yet, is to sign up with the forums and perhaps sign up with the Quality Control Centre. Quality Control Centre is probably not worth signing up with unless you have something that you want to report, but the forums are really useful. They're quite, they're very well used by our community. So they're definitely worth signing up for, or even just without signing up, you can still search them and you can find useful information. I mean, I didn't know about this library, this EXIF library, and I found it on the forums. So always useful to join the forums. Okay, so we've still got about 20 minutes. If you do have any other questions, do pop them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. So with the repeat for each line that you showed earlier, is there an easy way to tell this to skip the first line? So there's not really. What you could do is you could have a little counter. Do I still have that stack open? Just hide this for now. So for each line, we'll start at line 1. But what you can do is, I guess you could have a little counter in there, so you can remember what line number you're on, perhaps, without doing a repeat for each. And you would just do that by doing, say, repeat. You could use a counter and tell it only to work on t-index, or what you could do, and actually this is probably what I would do, is I would put line 2 -1 field 1 into a variable, and then I would just do repeat for each line t-line in tdata, and then you wouldn't need to do this. So doing that effectively just takes the second to the last, going from line 2 to the last line of field 1 into a variable, and then you're repeating over the contents of the variable rather than the field. And that actually might be a little bit faster because you're not having to use a field reference. It's not having to look at a field reference every time. And also you're not sort of affecting the data that's in the field directly. You've sort of made a copy of the data, just the part that you need, into a variable, and then you can work with the contents of the variable. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would put line 2 to -1, which is 2 to the last line. So it works for all chunk expressions. You can count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can count from the end backwards, whether that's characters or words or lines or items. -1 is the last character, word, line, item. -2 is the second last, etc. So that can be really helpful with things if you know, for example, that you're working with a file name that has .lcb on the end. You can go from character 1 to -5, and that'll chop the .lcb off the end for you. So that can be super useful using the sort of the negative indexes like that. Yes, Devlin's mentioned the multiple accounts. Yes, we would love to be able to consolidate them. I think it's partly that everything was sort of created at a separate time, and we would love to be able to consolidate them, but I think it's quite a lot of work. I have multiple accounts. I've got my LiveCode account, my forum account, my Quality Control Center account, my GitHub account. There's so many. It would be really nice to have them consolidated, and it's something that we are aware of, and that we would very much like to be able to do. So let me just have a look. I think it's still just the 3 of us. It's a shame that more people couldn't make it to our last session. And hopefully, did I download Lonnie's stack? I didn't. I can. So it's in the sample stacks. And then it's called Play YouTube, so I just searched for YouTube. And I can see that's Lonnie because it's got the creator there, lonnie.hardesty, so I can download it. And there it is. So it just opens. If you download it via the sample stacks in LiveCode, it'll open up in LiveCode, and there's his stack. And I think he's sort of taken a lot of the things that we talked about in previous sessions. And I think there's maybe a card for each thing that he was just. We've got a data grid there. Ooh, something's playing music. I think that must be the stack. Oh, it's, yes. I'm just going to close this. So that was Lonnie's Play YouTube stack playing a YouTube video. So yeah, so that's why that's what started there. Oh, hi Kelly, nice to see you. Like I was just saying, we've got about 15 minutes left, and sadly this is our last session. So if you've got any questions that you want to get in, then download them now. Download them? That's not the right word. I was thinking about downloading Lonnie's stack. If you've got any questions that you want to ask in these last 15 minutes that we've got together, then ask them now. So it looks like Lonnie's actually uploaded the stack twice. I would go with this one because it's bigger, so it's probably got more in it. Oh, that's his mouse behavior stack, and that's his Play YouTube stack. So yes, they're both up there. Oh, Devlin, did you see the message will stop supporting this browser soon? Oh, that's just because that uses our browser widget, or it might be using our old, before we had the browser widget, we had a browser control, Rev Browser, which would allow you to create a browser, but it all had to be done using code, kind of like creating the mobile controls. So before we introduced the browser widget, then we had Rev Browser, and the Rev Online stack has been around for quite a long time, so I'm guessing that it probably used the Rev Browser. I actually didn't see the message, but I will have a look and see if I can see where that is and where that might be happening, because we probably want to get that resolved. There was something that prompted something in my mind, and now I can't remember what it was. It might have just been, I was going to mention that the reason that a lot of the built-in parts of LiveCode start with Rev is because the old name of the company, we were initially Runtime Revolution, and then we were Run Rev, and then we became LiveCode. So Rev is our sort of internal, that's our little coding convention that suggests that it's an internal sort of part of the IDE if it starts with Rev, and that's why, because that is the old name of the company. Okay, so Peter's asked, can you comment on calling and running an external program from LiveCode? So that will depend what you want to do. So there are a couple of ways you can do it. The first way is just to launch another program, which you can do using the launch command. So you can launch an application, or you can launch a PDF and it will open up in a PDF viewer. So the launch command is one way to do that. So you can use launch document, which will open a document with the operating system default program. And then there's just the launch command, which will launch an application. So you can use the launch command on mobile if you want to launch another app, as long as it has a custom URL scheme. Sorry, I had to dig that out of my brain somewhere. Is this in the dictionary? It might not be, but if I can show you in the standalone application settings. So the launch command won't work on mobile. So if I go back to launch, you'll see that here it is just Mac, Windows and Linux, so just the desktop platforms. So if you want to be able to launch other applications on mobile, then you use the custom URL scheme. So for example, the App Store has a custom URL scheme, WhatsApp, I think Spotify, they all have custom URL schemes, and basically you would launch URL rather than just launch. So you're launching a URL, and the first part of the URL, instead of being HTTP or file or FTP, whatever it might be, then it's the custom URL scheme for that application. So I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know that the App Store has one because I've used it in a project for when an update is available, you can actually launch the App Store from within the application. Similarly, you can launch a WhatsApp message, etc. And so for iOS and Android, for both of those, you would use the custom URL scheme. And you just, these fields are for defining a custom URL scheme for your app. If it's an existing custom URL scheme, you just use you would just use the custom URL scheme for that app, and you would just do get URL with the custom URL scheme, or launch URL, sorry. So launch URL. Yeah, so you can launch URL HTTP or file or tell. So those are the built-in ones, and you can do similar things for other things with custom URL schemes. And also you can use the shell command as well. So you can run shell commands as if you were in the terminal from inside LiveCode. And basically it's a shell function. So you just call shell with your command line. So for example, here, that's your shell command. And you can run that from within LiveCode, and it will give you back the results. And so you can use the shell to do things like to launch applications, other things like that. Once it's launched, there's you don't have a lot of control over it. You are just launching another application. But of course, you can do things like you can pass a file to it. You can pass command line arguments, things like that. So those are your options. You can use the launch command, you can use the shell command, and on mobile as well, you can use custom URL schemes. So hopefully that will help. Let's see, any other questions? Okay, so I don't think I've missed any of the questions. If I have, maybe just pop them in the chat again and I will come back to them. And as always, we'll write these up and get the slides uploaded. It's often the start of next week before they get uploaded because I have to write them up. But yes, hopefully these will be useful. Yeah, launch and shell, that's great. I hope that both of those are useful for you, Peter. Okay, so just under 10 minutes left. If you do have any other questions, just pop them in. I don't know if any of you have joined the Lockdown Learning series, but that's continuing. So if you are interested in that, that's ongoing. It started last week, so there's been 3 sessions so far. But just like these sessions, they're rewatchable afterwards. But So the next lockdown learning session is actually tomorrow at 4:30 British Summer Time. So that will be half an hour earlier than this session started, wherever you are. Let me see what it is. I think it is using multimedia in LiveCode, but let me double check. I'll bring up the schedule here. So our schedule, so tomorrow is, yes, Advanced Multimedia. It's a talk from our 2009 developer conference, and that's tomorrow at 4:30. So like I say, half an hour earlier than this session started for wherever you are. So yeah, you can find the whole schedule on our website at livecode.com/lockdownlearning. In general, they are Tuesdays and Fridays, and then there are 5 brand new sessions, which will be on Thursdays. So there's been 3 so far, so Tuesday, Friday, Tuesday. Next one is Advanced Multimedia on June the 19th. Okay, so Peter, yes, I believe they send out an email just before, I think half an hour to 15 minutes before you'll get an email with the link. If that hasn't arrived in time, then I think you can use the same link as the previous one. They're sort of all, they've been done as the first 10, I think, are all sort of done as one session, but you should get a reminder email, yes, and if it doesn't arrive, I'm pretty sure you can use the same link as previous. Okay, Devlin's asked, can you review some of the HTTP commands? I'm looking to see differences for those available in a business license. So I think with HTTP commands, there aren't any differences. Where the difference comes in with your business or Indy license is with the tsNet extension. So tsNet is a networking library that's available in LiveCode, and it's part of all our versions, but there are a few features that are only available in Indy and Business. So if you search for tsNet in the dictionary, then you can see that all the ones that are blue are included in Indy and therefore also included in Business. Okay, so there's one that's business only. And I think that's because those are, yeah, so that's RSA private public keys. So that's business only. All of these are Indy and Business, Indy and Business. SMTP, these ones are business only, but that's it. So that looks like there's just four functions that are business only: tsNet generate key, tsNet SMTP, tsNet SMTP file, and tsNet SMTP file sync. I think those are the only differences between Indy and Business for tsNet. So if you don't need those, then you can just stick with the Indy version. If you do need those, then those are the ones that are business only. There also might be something in our store page that might go into a bit more depth. Because off the top of my head, these might not show up in the Indy dictionary because they're not part of it. I'm not sure how that works. Oh, so tsNet upload versus tsNet upload file. Let's see. So I think the only difference there is that this sends the data, the contents of the file, whereas this you can pass it the file. So in tsNet upload file, it's the full path to the file, whereas tsNet upload, you actually pass the actual data, I think. So yeah, so that looks like the difference, but they're both in Indy. So I guess I'm not sure what the usage difference would be for you, why you would choose one over the other. It looks like it's just the difference between using the file directly and using the data from the file. I guess if you're using the file directly, you don't need to read in the data first, you can just pass the file directly. Oh, Kelly, good. I'm glad you managed to get somewhere with your sort of your color swatch stack. That's, I mean, if you do want to share it with us, I mean, you can send it to me at support@livecode.com. I'd love to see what you've made, but you can also do what Lonnie did, which would be, if you wanted to share it, you could upload it to our sample stacks. But if you do get on well with it, please do let us know at support. We might try and entice you to write a blog post or something about the thing you managed to make after doing our lockdown learning sessions. That'd be really nice. And I personally, I like to see what people have made. It's one of the nice things about doing this part of the job, is actually seeing what people are making with LiveCode. A lot of the time we don't always get to see the things that people are making. So it's actually really nice to see what people have done. Okay, so that's us pretty much at the end of this session. If you've got any last minute questions, then pop them in. You can always email support or talk to us on the forums. There is a commercial support forum, which you get access to if you have an Indy account. Yeah, I hope I get to talk to you all again, and yeah, let us know what you're working on. If any of you are attending the lockdown learning sessions, then I will see you at those. And yes, I hope everybody's found these sessions useful. I've enjoyed doing them. It's been a nice thing to do, and yeah, thank you all for contributing and for being so engaged. It's been great, and I hope everybody's got just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, so I hope that everybody's enjoyed them and you've got something out of it, and it's helped you a bit of a kickstart to LiveCode. So yes, thank you, Kelly. That's very, very kind. Yes, so hopefully we'll make it through, and we'll come out the other side stronger than ever. I think that's how everybody feels just now. So yeah, good luck everybody with your LiveCode journey, with your apps that you're making with this current crisis, and I hope to hear from all of you. And thanks again for joining me and for being part of these sessions. So have a lovely evening, everybody, and goodbye.